Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, tonight we're diving into another fairly recent horror film, and one that's very much beloved in the horror community. Adam Wingard, who has now gone on to direct a bunch of Godzilla films. We're talking about You're Next.
Yes, Damon, You're Next, which kind of falls right at the tail end of what we would call the Dark Ages, right? The 2000s to the 2010s were some of the times when I don't think we were as invested in horror. It just seemed to be there. But I remember You're Next, just the name and the imagery, the masks and all that stuff was something that I was very familiar with. It was just out there, and it did pretty well too. It was $1 million budget movie that ended up grossing somewhere around 25 million. I don't know if it truly made its money back with all the promotions and all that good stuff, but it's definitely one of those films that has permeated throughout the years. And until I watched it for the podcast, I realized I've never really watched it all the way through. It's one of those movies that like I'd seen a little bit of and kind of watched. I have a feeling like my wife has definitely watched it all the way through because she just watches like any horror movie that comes on TV. She'll just watch as long as it isn't too scary. That's kind of her rule. And this is your classic kind of home invasion movie. It did remind me a lot of The Strangers. It's just tonally like completely a different type of movie, and we'll probably talk tone a little bit on this podcast. But yeah, I realized like this was actually my first watch of You're Next. What about you? Did you see You're Next in the theaters?
I did not see this in the theater. I did see it, I would say, within like a year of it coming out, because it was one of those word of mouth horror films where it was like, have you seen You're Next? You should check it out. It's really cool. It's a really fun horror movie. And, they're like tonally, it's a home invasion movie, but tonally it feels more like in tune with like a Scream or like, one of those kind of like 90s horror films than it does like The Strangers. It's not quite that terrifying, but it is really good. And so I watched it, I want to say like on a Blu-ray or maybe it was on cable, I can't remember, but I watched it and I enjoyed it. But I was like, okay, this was cool. Like, it was different. I enjoyed it. And then I kind of just tucked it away in the back of my head, never really revisited it that much until fairly recently, within like the last 2 years, I went back and rewatched it, and I was like, you know what, this is a lot better than I remember it being. And then it's been on cable a lot this month, or been on like HBO a lot this month. I don't have cable, but you know what I mean. HBO, let's just say, for the old folks who still say cable. It's been on HBO, I think, this month, or like 2 months ago, right around Halloween. And so I watched it again, and I was like, God, this movie is a lot of fun. Like, this is actually a really fun movie. It's not breaking new ground necessarily. It's not a, monumental horror film necessarily, but it's a lot of fun. It's a different take on a home invasion. And now I've seen it, 4 or 5 times, including one more time for this podcast. But no, I didn't. I knew I had heard about it, but I didn't really know what it was until, like I said, probably about a year later, when people just kept saying, have you seen You're Next? Have you seen You're Next? I'm like, all right, I'm going to go watch You're Next. And here we are today, where it's definitely a cult classic. I mean, listen, you say $25 million earned on a $1 million budget. I mean, I have to imagine that's pretty profitable, considering $1 million budget film generally doesn't get $20 million of promotion from the studio. So $25 million is pretty impressive for that low budget of a film. And it definitely has become kind of a inside horror classic. Like, horror fans generally, not to lump all horror fans into one category, but horror fans typically enjoy this movie. Like, this is one that comes up, we're like, oh yeah, that's a really fun horror movie.
Yeah. Now fun and horror movies don't always go hand in hand for me, Damon. You know this. I'm not big on self-aware humor. It doesn't work for me. If it works for you, I'm very happy for you. It doesn't work for me. I'll be honest, the humor in this movie does not work for me at all. It just doesn't. Flat. Like, I think every comedic scene in this movie just felt incredibly forced. That's not to say that this is a bad movie. Not at all. I just think that, like, there's a whole subset of people who are like, I want funny with my horror. I want like snarky with my horror all the time. And I've heard people say it flat out, like, I don't want serious horror. And I'm like, okay, well, it's weird because it's about killing people, which is a pretty serious thing. But believe me, it's all up to taste. And there's so many like subgenres of horror. And I think, and it, to me, really, You're Next is an interesting case study because I think it's one of these rare movies, Damon, where I can say it throws kind of like as many genres at us as possible, and it doesn't screw itself up. It's actually a pretty tight movie. Like, it's a home invasion movie. It's a slasher. It's a dark comedy, I guess. Yeah, I couldn't find a laugh if I tried. But it is indeed, like, I could see that they're trying to make a funny movie. It's a revenge movie. It's a good for her movie. Like, it's a lot of those things, but it's all done very efficiently. I think what I came away with was like, oh, like this is a really like this is a really tight movie. I can see why this is a successful movie. Like, even if I didn't enjoy what probably half the audience really enjoys is the dark humor of this movie. I was like, it's still like way better than a lot of movies that I watch that try to throw a million things at you. It's like, Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett, the writer and director respectively, they really knew how to weave it all together. I can understand why Adam Wingard now is directing $250 million movies. That's it's hard to juggle that many elements and pull them off successfully. And by the way, I watched Godzilla versus Kong. Actually fucking liked it. Like, I really did. Like, I was like, this is a fucking cool movie. So I give them credit in that respect. Did the humor work for me? No. But did I see in front of me something where I was like, oh, I get why people talk about You're Next. It makes a lot of sense. Damon, I'm going to be like bluntly honest with you. I think I know why when I originally saw this movie, however long ago I saw it or pieces of it, I walked away from it. It feels very, very, very film school. It feels like what you watch a film school student make as their thesis project or whatever. And that part of it's not a problem. The problem is I'm looking at the timeline and I go, okay, that's 2011. That's 6 years after I graduated film school. And you know what I was doing 6 years after I graduated film school, Damon? I was still getting people coffee. I was still just trudging away in the film business, making very little money, finding very little success. By the way, after film school, I thought I was going to be directing music videos. I had all these grand plans, and reality just fucking smacks you in the face. And so when I saw movies structured like this, and there's others, and that I should have wrote them down, but there are others from surrounding directors similar to Adam Wingard that also just made me ill when I watched them. And Damon, I'm going to be very honest with you. It had nothing to do with the quality of the movies, and it had everything to do with my bitterness in the industry. That's the kind of honesty I think a lot of people don't give.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was bitter that I was watching these film school guys, these film school aces, by the way, because they're doing a great job. And I was going, I wanted to be that guy. And so it colored my attitude towards those movies unfairly to these people, unfairly to Adam Wingards and Simon Barrett's and all the others. I just went, man, fuck those guys, because I wanted to do that. But in my older age, Damon, in my twilight years, possibly, I go, oh, you were just being bitter, and I caught a lesson in that when I watched this movie. I go, oh, you were just bitter at all those movies because it's what you wanted to do, so you were judging them unfairly, and that's indeed where I was. And I'm the only reason I'm really bringing this up is to maybe offer that up to the audiences that tend to spew a lot of vitriol at filmmakers. It's kind of a problem now, I would say, in social media that people are out there just shitting on things. Part of me is like, you know what? Like, maybe examine yourself internally a little bit and ask yourself, why are you so angry at people you don't know? Why are you so angry at people who just put something out there to try and entertain you? So for me, like, this is a wild psychological and emotional diversion, but it's an important lesson because I care about movies and I care about movie making and I care about all that stuff. And so if you're in the audience and you find yourself like ready to shit on things rather quickly, it's probably not the things. It could be you.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. I mean, when you have a certain opinion going in, and when you have a certain feeling towards a movie going in, it's always going to color how you view it, how you experience it, for good or for worse. You may go in loving an actor, loving a director, and not giving an honest assessment of the performance because you're just so ingrained in wanting to appreciate what that particular actor or director did. And you may come away saying, "Man, I enjoyed that." When in reality, you may be thinking back here, that kind of sucked. I didn't really enjoy that movie, but because you like that person, you like that director, you like that writer, you color the way you see it, and so that's absolutely understandable. And when you say that, I get it. I totally get it. Like, this is not the most complicated horror film ever made. I mean, there are some practical effects thrown in there, and there's some stunt work and things like that. But this is a film, as you said, that seems like a great first movie. It's not a first film for these guys, but in terms of the simplicity, it all takes place in one location, so you're not, doing, tons of shooting and having to, secure locations and things like that. All takes place inside one house. You got your ensemble cast in there, so it's just all people in there, all practical effects. It's all, fairly, and again, I'm not a filmmaker, but it seems like fairly routine stunts, things like that. Like nothing out, no crazy out of the ordinary, outside of maybe when Aaron jumps out of the second story to go to the ground. Maybe that would be a little bit more of a stunt than you would normally have on a cheaper film. But yeah, it seems very simple. Now, and very like low maintenance. That's a good word. I'm looking. Low maintenance.
Sure.
Like you're not hiring John Woo to do the action scenes here. Um, so that being said, I think that also speaks to what works so well with this movie is because it's not the most complicated movie. It's a very simple concept. And two things that I read from Simon Barrett and Adam Wingard doing research for this movie that I appreciated. One, which is where this film sets itself apart from films like The Strangers, Them, other home invasion stories. One, their female protagonist, their female hero, in this case, Erin, who is played by, I always forget the name, played by Sharni Vinson. They don't make her a final girl. They don't make her a survivor. They make her a fighter. They make her,
Yeah.
She is the reason that people survive this thing. It's because she's a badass. They don't make her afraid, trembling in a corner, and she survives it. They wanted to make her the hero, which is different. That's a different trope than the final girl, quote unquote, or the scream queen. Like they wanted to turn her into like an antagonist. Like she's going to go after these people attacking her. So that's a little slightly different take on this genre because when you watch The Strangers, which is great, by the way, I love The Strangers. It's a truly terrifying movie, but Liv Tyler character and it was a Scott Speedman, like they're just surviving. Like they fight back the people who are in their house, but they're not like they're actively surviving when they fight back. Erin is going after this. Like she's putting nails into boards and setting traps and like she's going to get them. And in my mind, like yes, there are other versions of this, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Nancy in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Like instead of just being afraid of Freddy Krueger, she's like, okay, I'm going to get this guy. And so she sets traps and booby traps and like she goes after him, which is a little different take than just the I'm here to survive. So that was one trope that they broke with this movie that I really appreciated. The other part was one of the things that makes a lot of these home invasion movies so scary. And I don't know if you've ever seen Them. Them is a really strong film. It's from France. I loved it. And it is really similar to The Strangers. And I know when they did The Strangers, they never said that like this is a remake of Them, but it's a remake of Them. And that's not a bad thing. They're both incredible movies. I would argue The Strangers might actually be scarier than Them, but they are essentially the same movie. And the premise of Them and The Strangers is, and that's what makes it so terrifying. This home invasion happens, and at the end, when they're like, why us? And they're like, you were home.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. And that is like, oh my God, like just the randomness of it. And that sometimes is life, the randomness. Like there's not always a design to what happens. Like when you get into a car accident or, something bad happens, it's not because, fate interceded. It's just, that's life. It just happens. But to that point, though, what I liked about Your Next is they gave it a purpose. They gave the home invasion a purpose. You don't know what it is up front. So up front, you're thinking it's just the strangers. There's a home, and these guys are wearing animal masks, very creepy. You're thinking, man, this is just them, another random act of violence. And then when you finally figure out what's going on, when Felix and Z reveal themselves as the orchestrators behind this entire massacre, that they were trying to off their family to get an inheritance, which is awful. But when you realize that motivation, you're kind of like, okay, it's another small twist that makes this different than the strangers and them. And it works, especially with the time you spend with these petulant, childish siblings who clearly don't really like each other. They're begrudgingly there on the behest of their parents, and like there's just this underlying cynicism and anger between all of them. And so you kind of understand where they're like, yeah, I'll rub out my family to get the millions of dollars because fuck these people.
Yeah, that was something I really appreciated right away was when they're having the family dinner. The buildup was like almost a little like too long, but it was to kind of establish everybody. And then they're all at the table and I was like, "Oh, cool. All these siblings are shitty. Got it. I don't have to root for any of these people. That works. So where are we going from here?" And then when the attack happens, the way Aaron like springs into action sort of created like a kind of not I don't know if mystery is the right term, but you go, why is she being so like so tenacious? Like what is that? Like it stuck out, and you were like, what is going on? And then you pick up the idea really quickly that, and I guess this is a very old film at this point, folks. 12 years old. We're in spoilers the whole time. You get the sense that this is not a random attack anymore. You get the sense that this is not only planned, but there are probably bad actors on the inside this dinner. My first guess was Z, the girlfriend of Felix. I was like, oh, like Z has infiltrated these dunderhead sons, because all the sons in this house are shitheels. She's infiltrated and she knows that the family's wealthy, so she's after them. But on the flip side, Aaron is now this like action hero. So what's her deal? And there's this conversation between her and her boyfriend Crispin, played by AJ Bowen, as they're coming in, where like he lets her know that his parents are they work in military contracts or something like that. So, and that he's like, hey, just letting you know, I know you don't like that stuff. So I was like, well, there's some weird thing. So what it started to do was all this build up and all this character development was allowing me to go, I think now I'm in this, let's put all the pieces together and figure out why this is happening. And that's good. That's engagement. And you want that. You want to be fully engaged in what's going on with these characters. I didn't love the reveal that Aaron grew up in a survivalist camp, and not because of the reveal, but more so because it didn't explain why she was so good at fucking people up. Like it was just like, oh, my dad wanted to live off the grid. He thought everybody was out to get him. And so I was like, okay, like I kind of get it. I kind of get it. But it was like, but Aaron turns into a vicious murderer, Damon. I don't know that every survivalist camp teaches you how to murder the shit out of people.
I think part of that, and is like it's a little convenient, I guess, is the way.
Yeah, convenient, yes.
Convenient, yes. But at the same time, I don't really bump up against it too much, because what they're doing is they're creating a heroine, and the way to do that is to give her the skills to survive, and it's not just the general fighting back. Like she's ready to throw an axe at somebody and kill them. It's that she's setting this up to get them. Like she wants to, when she sets up the boards with the nails in them as a trap when you go through the windows, that's things you would think of if you're in like a weird survivalist camp and you're like, I need to protect my home. Brinks ain't doing it, so I'm going to set up traps in my own home, like booby traps in my own home. So if anyone's dumb enough to go in here, you're going to get fucked up. So that part again, very convenient, I admit. Like that did feel like just a little too convenient that, oh, she just happens to be at this party. But on the flip side of that, I appreciate it because all the kids, all the siblings, even their significant others, they all seem like just utter weasels in this movie. And it's funny that Crispin, who may be the weakest willed of them all, who's being basically mocked by his siblings for being a professor in college, making no money, can't even get a fellowship. Like they're basically like he's like the lowest rung on the family ladder here, as far as like a guy who's technically accomplished. He's a professor in college, but to his family, that's like the lowest rung. That's like the lowest job you could have. Like you're a professor making $60,000 a year. Oh my god! Like what are you? And
Yeah.
so they all look down upon him, and it's a little bit fitting that he also has the most inappropriate relationship with
Yes.
former students, and also that when you meet him and Aaron, like they're together and they seem together, but you can also tell that there's this um sense of they don't really know each other. They're in an infatuation. She
Yeah.
was infatuated by her teacher, her professor, who again they held a certain level of power, certain level of influence over you as a student. Not saying it was a power dynamic, but possibly, and also just like you have a certain reverence for your educators. That's just a normal student teacher relationship. And then on the flip side, the fact that she, like, when she tells Z, oh, yeah, I grew up in a survivalist camp, that's how I learned all this stuff, she goes, Crispin doesn't even know that. You can tell they don't really know each other. It's very
Yeah.
surface level. Like they're just kind of like, they're boning, but like they don't really know each other. And so it doesn't feel totally disingenuous to the character when she says that. It's a little convenient, I admit, like you're doing a home invasion and this girl just happens to grow up in a survivalist camp. But listen, that's movies. You know what I mean? You just kind of you just have to roll with the punches a little bit, because I mean, there's moments in
Oh
this
yeah.
where it's like would a blender getting turned upside down, jammed into somebody's head, really work like that? No, but it's fun for the movie, and
It's
so
the creativity of it. Yeah.
yeah, and so the fact that she grew up in a survivalist camp and just knows how to react to these very heightened situations, I'm fine with, because ultimately what I enjoyed about Aaron, enjoyed about that role, was what I mentioned earlier, was that they wanted to make her a badass. Like they didn't want her to, I hid in the closet
Right.
and the killers couldn't find me, so I survived. They wanted her to be like, fuck these guys. I'm going after them. They come in here, I'm going at. So like when she's like bashing that dude's head in with the mallet, or with the meat mallet, like that's like you just wouldn't see that reaction from a normal character in a horror film. They would be running the other way like every other character in this movie does. Aaron's like, I'm going to attack the problem because I was raised to get ready for a situation. I was raised for, the police to break into my home and come get my father, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in that regard, like it worked, even though again, very convenient, but it works.
It's a really sophisticated script. It really is. And just to back up just a second, the fact that Crispin and Aaron have this sort of inappropriate relationship is way ahead of its time, Damon. In 2011, we weren't talking about the power dynamics and the inappropriateness of a teacher and his student like becoming a couple. Like now we all go, wow, that's inappropriate. And but at the time, like nobody was blinking at it. But Simon Barrett, he and Adam Wingard knew the strength of that, and they knew the strength of that because of the reveal later on that Crispin is just as much a fucking shithead as anybody else. But they were like, if you had any doubt, let us give you that little nugget to understand. It's advanced. It just is. They were ahead of their time to go, he's kind of shitty for dating his teacher's assistant. And it's not a brand new trope anyway, but it's certainly been done over the years. But it was certainly a great way to double down that you don't need to root for Crispin to survive. Don't worry about him. And then you get Erin and her survivalist background coupled with this family of privilege. Everybody in this family is weak. I mean, literally, the way they dress the characters, the way their facial hair is cut. So you're talking about hair, makeup, wardrobe, and then of course the writing and the acting. All the family members, you feel just how soft they are, in that they've never had to really struggle for anything in their lives. when the shit hits the fan, they don't know what to do. And even like, for instance, the grand reveal, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The grand reveal is that it was Felix and Crispin's plan the whole time to do this, to split this money. Felix had an opportunity with nobody in the room. It was just him, Z, and Aaron. After he watches Aaron violently just hit one of the attackers over the head with a meat tenderizer. They were in the room with her all by their lonesome. She didn't know what was going on. She still had her guard down with regards to them. Felix was so weak he couldn't in that moment capitalize and kill her when that would have been the perfect time to do it. They had a moment, but it's because he's a weakling, not because like, wow, that was a stupid horror decision on his part. It's not a hole in the plot. It's a character trait. The character trait is Felix was a coward. And he hired tough men to do his job because he's a coward and he can't do it. And he was a coward in a moment when he had Aaron pinned because that's who he is. That's who he's always been. And that's why I was impressed with the script. I was like, it's pretty fucking airtight, because as a character, he would have never attacked her. In the opportune moment, it would have made sense to kill her, but he couldn't do it. And Aaron, on the flip side, coming from nothing and having to basically crawl her way to like the professor, right? The lowly professor of the whole family. Like that was her big gain in life. Wow. Like, I'm dating a college professor. That's a big deal. But when the shit hits the fan, she knows how to act. And she doesn't just act. I mean, she's proactive. She's like it was jarring actually, just to see just how, like, she's basically just like clawing back at them almost immediately. And you're like, wow, okay, that's interesting. But that's like the class dynamic. So again, when I say that this movie is throwing every single thing it can possibly throw at you, aside from like supernatural elements, it threw all those things at you, but it's an interesting case study of where it actually worked.
Yeah, it's like I said, what I enjoy about this movie so much is it takes the home invasion story and then kind of flips it on its head a little bit to make it, because when you see The Strangers, which is a great movie, I love it, by the way, what we said is most terrifying about that is the randomness, because you were home. That is terrifying, because that really does let you know it could happen to anybody. It could happen to you. That is scary, right? Like the randomness of it. But then when you take that and kind of flip it on its head and you get these children of privilege who grew up wanting for nothing, needing nothing, like they are provided for, they are extremely wealthy, they have everything. But even when you have everything, that's still not enough. And that, I think, is the message in this movie, is that even at their peak of financial security, wealth, generational wealth, that's still not enough. Felix and Crispin, who did not quite live up to their own expectations or perhaps their parents' expectations. They don't ever say what Felix does, do they? Do they mention what
I don't remember what he did, no.
But Crispin, they kind of openly mock him for being a college professor, as I said, which is actually a perfectly fine profession. It's actually a pretty revered profession. But to his family, he's like the weakest link. And so they mock him. And so when you understand what they're doing and the revelation that this was all set up by Felix and Crispin, you get it. And it's pretty messed up, because they're just like, they didn't feel appreciated by their own family. They didn't live up to that standard. And so they're going to take their revenge. And as you said, they're not brave enough to do it themselves, so they hire people to do it. And the one moment when Felix stabs his brother to death, the only reason he does that is because his brother, who looks like the shitheel at the start, he's like the cocky older brother who kind of bullies all his younger siblings. He's not involved at all. The only reason Felix is able to kill him, two reasons. One, the killers are already getting messed up because Aaron's already killed one of them and she's on the hunt for the others. So like, they're like, oh shit. And then the second part of that is why he doesn't kill Aaron in that moment that you mentioned is because he's terrified of Aaron. He is scared of Aaron. he is scared of the military guys he hired, the ex-military guys, when they come in the house and they basically are like, we're going to kill you too. And, he has to talk his way out of it by offering more money because that's all he can do. He can't actually fight back.
Yeah, there's
When
nothing
he
he can
goes to
do.
the basement, when he goes to the basement and kills his older brother, that's because his older brother already had an arrow in his back. He's bleeding. He's weak. He's no threat. And so he's just like, why don't you just die already? Because he's like, you're supposed to be dead already. I'll kill you. Because he presents no danger to him. Aaron is a threat. Aaron is terrifying to Felix. Aaron, makes Felix piss his pants.
Yeah.
His brother doesn't do that. But he's still, again, it takes to the point where his brother is near death with an arrow in his back and barely cognizant after taking, I don't know how many Vicodin, that his brother's willing to be like, okay, I'll take this into my own hands because this is getting out of control. This is the one thing I control is take out my weakling older brother. He couldn't possibly do that to Aaron because that could go so horrifically wrong, which is what exactly happens when Z and Felix do finally just say, when they're found out, when she realizes that they're involved and they get into that big final fight with the three of them, at that point, they're just reacting. They're not really they have no idea what to do, which is why both of them get killed because Aaron's a badass and they're both cowards.
Excuse me, Damon. Yeah, no, it makes me laugh because it's just, and I think Felix, if it's almost implied he might not even work at all. Like I think there was an implication that like Felix is the truest, like has no sense of himself.
Total trust fund baby.
Yeah, and here comes Z, his girlfriend of the moment, and all that stuff, and so the fact that it was kind of all funneling towards Felix and Z, and then you get the reveal at the end, which to me I saw coming a mile away. Even though I think I may have seen this movie in pieces, I sort of remember the oldest brother Drake more with the arrow in his back as the most memorable thing I can think of, but watching it through for this podcast, in the beginning I go, Crispin is 100% in on this. Like he's so Damon, just dough. He's just wet dough. Like there's no way he's got a spine on him. And as the movie kind of progressed, I go, it can't just be Felix. And then Crispin comes back after like running out into the, into the night or whatever. Really, I just picture him hiding behind a tree, looking at the house, going, "What's going on in there? Okay, it's quiet now. I'll go back." Like I have a feeling that's exactly how it went down. And then he does the slimiest thing of all. He goes like, "Hey, everybody's dead. Like, I know this was crazy for you. I know. But think about it, like everybody's dead. I'm gonna inherit all these millions of dollars. Like we should just be together." like he really thinks that appeal is like, I know you just had to kill a lot of people and you're deeply traumatized by this horrific night, but like think about it, like wouldn't it be cool to be married to me because I'm rich now? Like worm Damon, like we're in this little short season of like wormy side characters because we've done like Midsommar with Christian, who's like the fucking sleaziest slime ball. We did Juno in The Descent, who's like fucking her best friend's husband and killing killing one of her friends and not copping to it. And then you get Crispin, who's like just a groveling fucking grub going, "Just please keep dating me because you're hot and I have money." And I was like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking spineless douchebag.
What's really funny about that character also is because when you meet, like you can tell when you meet Felix and you start to understand his motivations, he's very much a weak worm. Like he is that guy. Like I said, he couldn't possibly attack Aaron. Even though he had her dead rights, he could have easily just stabbed her or put her away right there. He didn't do it because he's terrified of Aaron because she's too strong-willed for him. Then when you finally get around to the big Christian reveal, when he calls him and he's just like, I'm not into the violent stuff, you realize that Crispin's even weaker than Felix, which seems almost impossible because Felix is very much a worm in his own right, but somehow yet like he's even more spineless than his own brother who's spineless, which is an incredible feat.
Yeah.
And yeah, when at the end he's like, no, 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 you were never supposed to be harmed. You were supposed to be the witness. Like we needed like one
Yeah,
witness to testify to what all this was to happen. And it's like, and Z wouldn't work, so he had to do you. Like what? Like he's just trying to explain his way out of a bad situation that he knows he's caught in, and watching him try to weasel his way out of it was just utterly hilarious. Because again, in that moment, it's him and her.
yeah,
If he was really like intent on this being done, and he knew that she found them out and she wasn't going to go along with the plan, he could have killed her. Like he could have killed her in that moment, and he is the lone survivor. But even then, much like with Felix earlier, he's terrified of Aaron at this point. So his only defense is, I'll give you a bunch of money and we can stay together. We'll be rich, please. Like that's just how weak this guy is. And so I do like that character because it feels very authentic to all these characters. When you see them sit down at that family dinner and it's nice for about 8 seconds and then they just start tearing into each other, I was like, yeah, I've seen this family dynamic. This is the Roys in Succession.
yeah.
This is, just the truly dysfunctional family, especially amongst wealthy kids, where they're all kids of privilege. They've all grown up wanting for nothing, yet they just cannot help but to lash out at each other.
This is where this movie sets itself apart, is with this groveling moment with Crispin, where a lot of other movies of very similar tone, of very similar design, fuck up. Is that in that final reveal where the woman has to be strong and take charge, and you find out that indeed the person that she was closest to was part of the problem. In these other movies, that guy sort of starts to exert power and sort of starts to kind of try to take charge. And it's like, no, that's actually not at the heart of that character. That's not how that guy is. Like they'd threaten her, or they'd be like, you don't know, they would try to be bigger than her in that moment. Instead, they wisely went no. Like, and you mentioned Succession. Like in Succession, when the going gets tough, like somebody just falls on their knees and cries because they're fucking weak. Like they're truly weak. They've never had to harden themselves against anything ever. And so lesser movies do that, where they go, okay, now we'll make the boyfriend the final boss. It's like, he's not the final boss. He's a fucking plebe. Like he's just a fucking roach to step on. And that's how they made Crispin. And that's why this movie, I think, is smarter than most movies in this sort of little subgenre of Good for Her.
And that's also to Aaron's point. Like, yes, they throw in the whole survivalist idea, which again sounds convenient. But what I do like about this is that, and I think like what I like about this is that Aaron, because she, even without the survivalist background, like you can tell she came from very little. Like she did not grow up as a person of means. So just in that regard, in and of itself, she's more equipped to deal with this than they are. The ones who weren't in on the plan. Obviously, like when you talk about Drake and his wife and everybody else who's not in on the plan with Felix and Crispin, none of them are equipped to deal with this. So even in just like the most minor of like just her own sensibilities, she's just better prepared to deal with this. Because if this was a movie that was like The Strangers and it was just a random act of violence, every single person in this house, minus maybe the dad who does try at least he grabs a fire poker and like he's ready to fight back in that regard. Everybody else would just be crawling into the corner, crying, going into the bedrooms, crying, hiding in a closet, crying.
Yeah.
Aaron, because she grew up basically like, I've got nothing, I've had nothing, you can't take this from me because I've got nothing, so fuck you, I'm fighting back. That in and of itself would have been her character regardless of the whole survivalist campaign, because you and I know as people who grew up with nothing, that's like, I remember when I was in school, there were always the rich kids who had everything, and they would come every day. They'd come to school with something new toy to show off, a new skateboard, a new CD player, or whatever it was at the time. They always had a new toy or trinket. Then you talk to guys like me and you, Patrick, who had nothing, and so maybe at Christmas we get like a really cool present. You get your new you get your new Game Boy, or you get your new, whatever,
Exactly.
and you are fiercely protective of that because you don't get that kind of stuff. That's not something you get every other day, every Christmas and every birthday. You're getting lavish presents. You got that Game Boy. And God damn it, if anyone fucks with that Game Boy, you're going down. You will fight tooth and nail to protect that Game Boy because you don't have 18 Game Boys hanging out in the back. You don't have your parents.
No.
Oh, your Game Boy broke, we'll buy you a new one. Like, that's the solution for these kids. Dad, my at the time, like my iPod broke. Oh, I'll just buy you a new iPod, son, no problem.
Right.
Our iPod, we're like, I'll stab you if you try to take my iPod. I will stab you if you break my iPod. That also speaks to Erin's character because she comes from nothing. And so even without the survivalist stuff,
Yes.
setting traps and stuff, but I'm just saying like she's been conditioned that I have nothing. And with the little bit I have in this case is her life.
Yeah.
Not taking that from me without a fight. Whereas all the people around her are just like, yeah, I'll just cower and cry in a corner and hope no one finds me.
Yeah. Yeah. This again, I kind of said it earlier. Like there's also this element of like class warfare. I mean, quite literally class warfare,
Yeah.
right? And who are the only other hardest people there? It's the hired guns, right? Who you barely get to know. You barely see them. But what you know of them is that they're ex-soldiers. So they probably came from being poor because typically soldiers start as poor people who go into the military because they'll pay for their room and board and they'll even give them college money if you want. So the only other people that are worth any of their salt are the actual killers. They're the only other people in this entire situation that know how to fight, that know how to do what they need to do to get the job done. So like, again, like that's another one of those elements. It's like this movie in the wrong hands would have been a mess, Damon. Because we talk about movies like this all the time where it's like you all did too much. And we always praise very simple movies. We just talked about the Descent. Couldn't be simpler. I mean, literally it's just people in a cave, and that's kind of all the movie is. But it's tremendous. A movie like this could be disastrous, but it was in the right hands. And it and all those elements, all those many layers were really put in a very harmonious way. Okay, so the humor didn't work for me. Big whoop. Everything else really did.
Yeah, and I would say the humor didn't necessarily land for me either. There were a couple goofy moments that kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but yeah, it didn't really get me in that regard. But what I love more than anything is everyone feels true to their character and everyone continues to be that person throughout the film. Because if, as you mentioned in that scene with Felix and Erin, where Erin is, she bashes the dude's brain in with a meat tenderizer, and she's just sitting there kind of soaking in the moment of what she just murdered someone, we hope for the first time. Easily Felix and Z could have attacked her and tried to kill her right there. They don't, because not only are they scared of her, but that's just not who they are. They're not, that's why they hired people. That's why they had to hire people to do this, because their family, it's not like their family's filled with badasses. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like Felix, it's not like Drake is this, bodybuilding badass who, walks around, and he's like a former athlete. Like, they're all kind of weak, mousy people. And in theory, if Felix was just like, I want these people gone, he could have orchestrated a killing spree in his own family, and he's the lone survivor. Very like Scream-esque or whatever you want to say in terms of setting the plot so he's the lone survivor, him and his girlfriend or however you want to play it. He can't do that. He can't possibly do that. So I'm going to hire the help to do it. And he hires ex-military guys, and just like when the one guy comes in and says, your brother? Well, my brother's laying over there dead with his head bashed in, and he's pissed off at this point, and he's just like, what is Felix's solution? I'll pay you more money. Yeah. That's all he can do. He's
got nothing else for him.
He can't threaten the soldier. He can't stand up for himself. He can't say, oh, no, the hell you're not. Like, I'm paying you a certain amount of money, you're doing this, or you're gone. No, he's way too much of a weakling to do that. He's scared to death of everybody in that house. And so, yeah, but everyone feels authentic to their character. And and as you said, Crispin is probably the weakest one of them all because he's too mousy to stand up for himself. And even though he is actually one of the more successful siblings because he actually has a job. It seems like nobody else does, with the exception, I think maybe
I think
Drake does, or
yeah, I think Drake was like an executive. I think he
yeah,
actually had a real job. Yeah.
yeah, but like everyone else pretty much seems like they're just living off the family teat. But he's just so ashamed because he doesn't live up to their standards, not his own standards, their standards. And he's the weakest one of all. And that's why I said in that moment when he finally reveals himself as what he is, and Erin is standing there with a knife in her hand, and he's trying to talk her out of it. Again, that's because he can't fathom physically going after her because he knows he would get his ass kicked and she would kill him. So he's like trying to talk her off the ledge and I'll offer you money and everything because that's all he's got. That's all this character can do, and that's what feels so genuine about this movie is that nobody comes outside of themselves in any of these moments. The most surprising moment, as I mentioned earlier, is when Felix finally puts the final knife or knives in Drake. And that's only because his brother was already so weakened and basically on the verge of half dead, anyways. That's it. Like, he's not that dude. None of these people
Yeah.
are those people.
Yeah, no, even the way Felix kills Drake is cowardly. It's cowardly because his brother's way bigger than him. You know, Drake's like way taller than everybody else. Like he's clearly the alpha sibling. I mean, he literally had 1,000 arrows in him at that point. So that's how Felix attacks him, by just meekly poking him with a bunch of screwdrivers. Because what else can he do? You know, like he's just a fucking weakling. It is true to form, and you could easily fall into the trap of what I call like revenge porn, which is it's a weird little like subset of certain screenplays where like you see a character do something way out of character to get revenge on the people they dislike. That's again from like that's personal experience where you go, here's what I would have fucking done in real life when that guy bullied me. This is what I would have done, but you didn't do it. You
Yeah.
know, this movie does not fall into that trap, but they go, nope, these guys wouldn't do it because they're fucking cowards.
Yep, absolutely. Patrick, with that being said, let's get into categories. We do have a lot of categories to get to tonight with this film, and I want to kick things off as we do each and every week with best performance. Ensemble cast, again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I feel like everyone in this movie is solid. There's not really a weak link in here. I actually really like even the killers. Like when you meet them,
Yeah.
like, they do seem menacing and foreboding. And so everyone really works well. So credit to the casting director and everyone who cast this movie. It's a pretty strong movie in that regard. But who stood out for you as best performance, Patrick?
My best performance goes to the master worm himself, AJ Bowen, who plays Crispin. Just Damon, I from start to finish, a character never felt weaker. A character never felt more pathetic. I mean, he gives. It's funny. Crispin and Christian from Midsommar are very similar names, but very similar vibes. Christian in Midsommar had a little more to him, a little more like fight in him. He could stand up a little bit, barely. Crispin has none of that. And for AJ Bowen to lean all the way into being completely weak is like, to me, brave as an actor. Because I mean, shit, you could pigeonhole yourself as the weakling in the eyes of casting directors and directors, but like AJ Bowen was willing to go like, no, this guy's a worm to the core. If you dissect him, there's not a single piece of hard material in there, and he plays it perfectly. And I was sure as the movie progressed that he was indeed in on it, but he was just simply too weak. Like my predictions came true, and even though I could see it a mile away, I was very satisfied with how his performance rounded out with that groveling last moment where he just literally just grovels his way into like going, please be with me, and I'll pay you to be with me, please. Like I dug it, Damon. I don't know what to tell you. Like it's weird to latch on to that a performance of an absolute like douche, but it was great.
What I also liked about that performance, because he is spineless. Like I'm shocked he can stand up straight because his spine is so weak he would just tumble over like a like a like a like a corpse. Um, one part I really liked about his performance, which is so funny, is when they're all huddled in the house together and the killers have attacked several times and his sister tries to get out and she gets lopped in the head because they have a wire set up out like this is all gone. Every attempt to survive so far has gone kind of wrong. And Crispin tells Aaron, I'm going to go for the car. I'm going to save us. I'll drive the car up. I'll say, you know, in that moment, like when you see it and you know what actually happens, you're like, what a gutless, pathetic weasel. Because he knows he's not in danger. He knows the killers know he's in on it, so they're not going to kill him. So he tries to be heroic in that moment. He's like, don't worry, babe. I'll go get the car and bring it back and save us all. And you're thinking to yourself, when I'm watching this movie, I'm like, this dude ain't saving shit. Like, this dude is like, even if he's not in on it, like, he's dead 8 seconds later. If he's actually not in on it, he's immediately dead.
But he's just going to get in the car and drive the fuck away. Like that was my impression.
Yeah, he's going to get in the car and be like,
I'm going to drive 6 towns over and call the cops.
Yeah, like one of those two things, but it's just so funny to watch it. Like when you watch it in the moment, it feels disingenuous to the character. Like there's no way this guy's going out for the car and like trying to save everybody. No way he's doing that. Or he's doing your thing where he drives off in the car.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But then when you know what happens at the end and you rewatch it, you're like, this is the only reason he's showing the slightest spine is because he knows he's not in danger. And it's hilarious to watch that scene again when he just goes, don't worry, babe. I'm going to go get the car and I'll bring it around. We'll get my dad out. We'll be good. It's just so hilarious to watch that scene after knowing what happens, just to see what a weasel this guy is.
And I could feel the bullshit in that scene. Like I was like, oh, he's bullshitting. Like he doesn't believe that's how this is going to play out. And then, like I said, more than likely he's just sitting in the bushes, just watching everything play out, going, okay, it sounds quiet in there now. I can go in now.
Yeah, like he's acting emasculated because like he knows his girlfriend is 10 times the badass he'll ever be. So in that moment, he's like, don't worry, babe, I got you. And you know deep down, he's like, if this is a real situation, he'd be pissing his pants and hiding behind the curtain going, save me, somebody save me. So, yeah.
Fucking weasel.
So for my best performance, listen, I liked everyone in this movie, to be honest. Like I didn't dislike anybody in this movie, but I feel like I have to pay homage to one particular actor in this movie, and that is the Queen, Barbara Crampton. And the reason I went Barbara Crampton, beyond this being a good performance from her, she plays the scared, terrified mother the entire time. And she also, there's a really interesting scene early in the movie when Aaron goes in the kitchen and asks Barbara Crampton's character, like, do you need help? Can I help you with the dishes? And she kind of just shrugs her off of like, you're just the latest girlfriend of my kids that you're not gonna be here 6 months from now, a year from now. So she's very dismissive of Aaron. But then she's like, you know what you could do? You could just like walk down to the neighbor's house to get me some milk, almost like a servant, almost like, I need you to go to the store for me. Just the way she says it in a very demeaning manner.
Yeah.
And Aaron's like, sure, I can do that. But here's also the reason why I give credit. And this is, again, Barbara Crampton, I love. It's been well documented on the show. I adore her. But also because she is great in this movie. But the reason I highlight her is because this is the movie that brought Barbara Crampton back. She had largely retired, raised a family, kind of left the film industry. And You're Next was the revitalization of her career when Adam Wingard cast her in this role as the mother in You're Next. And obviously since then, she's gone on to have a lot of great roles. We've done Jacob's Wife on this show. I just mentioned Suitable Flesh, which came out recently, which I really enjoyed. She's been in a lot of things since then, but this was the movie in 2011 that basically reignited her career, which I appreciate because I adore Barbara Crampton. I'm just a huge fan of hers, but I do like her performance in this movie. Yes, she does get killed off kind of early, but she plays the grieving mother very well.
Yeah, no, I think she plays all the elements really well, where it's sort of she's sort of a fragile kept woman a little bit, that's kind of the vibe she plays. And then you're right, that great moment with her and Aaron in the kitchen, that's very dismissive. It says a lot without saying a lot. That's veteran acting that shows up. And then of course, when the shit hits the fan, she just becomes a wailing, inconsolable mother, which makes total sense. And okay, yeah, that's not there wasn't like a lot of time for her on the screen, but the time that she did fill felt incredibly authentic. And it's Barbara Crampton. How do you not fucking love her? Come on.
Exactly. And also I want to give a shout out to another character who we've talked about in this show, a couple different movies we reviewed, bit of a horror icon in his own right. Larry Fessenden shows up in this movie. He's in the
That's right.
scene. He's the opening kill, and he's another one, iconic, been around forever. He was actually just in Killers of the Flower Moon, which I saw him and I was like, hey, it's Larry Fessenden in Killers of the Flower Moon. But he's like a horror icon in his own right, done a ton of horror, done a ton of genre films like this, and he pops up at the beginning and he gets axed off in the opening kill, which was kind of fun to see him there as well. And again, this is 12 years ago, so again, I don't know how much of a quality of an actor he was at that point, but he's kind of an iconic guy now. But in 2011, I don't know, but him showing up was kind of a cool little twist to have him in there as the opening kill.
How about the other staple of Rewind to the Living Dead, Ty West making a cameo as the boyfriend, Tariq. He's a filmmaker, and there I think he's dating the daughter of the family.
Yeah.
The
documentarian. I don't do commercials. I'm a documentarian.
Yeah, and he's wearing like a shamach and all this stuff. Like he's super pretentious. Like he really leaned into pretentious filmmaker, which I appreciated. Ty West, like being willing to be the model for pretentious filmmaker, and he gets into a great little argument with I think it's Drake, who's like, why don't you direct commercials? Commercials to me are the best thing out there. You know, you get in, you get out. I was like, oh, that uncomfortable conversation. I've had that conversation at family gatherings. You ask why I don't like Thanksgiving, Damon. It's because of conversations like that. You have those with family members, and I love that little interaction. So I might as well throw out a little shout out to Ty West.
And also, he gets killed first. He gets the arrow through the forehead.
That's right.
But also, the other thing I love about it, the pretentiousness of that character, which is really funny, is when she's like, he's a documentarian. Oh, really? What have you done? I did one film. Where was that? Like the San Bernardino Junior High Film Festival.
It was the underground film, like some underground film festival. And they're like, was it underground? Like, did it take place underground?
He has one documentary, and it's only been seen like four people in some random underground festival. But he's acting like he's Tarantino. He's sitting there like, I'm important. I'm such a filmmaker, and he's like, when Drake starts kind of jabbing at it with the commercial thing, which is also Drake being a bit of an asshole, but he's just like, no, I wouldn't bemean myself by being a commercial filmmaker. And you're like, oh my god, everyone in this scene is terrible.
Yeah. You're happy to see any one of them die, minus Aaron.
Yeah, it's so funny. All right, let's talk about favorite character, because there are definitely some characters in here. And going back to when we did Midsommar, I said, Christian ended up being like my favorite character because I hated him so much. Like I hated his character so much that I just wanted him to die. And that speaks to performance and also like how well you wrote a character. Outside of Aaron, and I guess to a lesser extent the parents, because the parents don't seem like they're terrible people. Like the
dad's an arms dealer, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you say that. But I mean, like, they're not like abusive parents. So,
right.
They're just like they're wealthy parents who raised privileged children. So they're not terrible people in that regard. But like everybody else is pretty terrible. So you're kind of like, everyone outside of Aaron can die, and I really wouldn't feel bad about it. But who is your favorite character in your next?
My favorite character was only labeled the fox mask. Now there's a fox, there's a lamb, and I think a rabbit. Right, or something like that. I don't remember what the other one was.
I think so.
Yeah. So the fox mask is the only one you really get to talk to. You kind of see the other one a little bit. You see the other ones a little bit, and they say a little bit. But the fox mask, this guy, I just really appreciated that. Like you got a glimpse at these killers that are relatively unknown and silent. You don't get to know them. You don't go into their backstories or anything other than that they're ex-military. That's all you know about them. But the fox mask, what I loved about this guy's performance is that he was a wild dog. Like he was clearly outside their realm entirely. And the way he carried himself in those moments and all the interactive moments was like, yeah, this is a guy these people shouldn't be fucking with. Like you could just tell. And I appreciate it. He was tonally different than everybody else in this even Aaron, who Aaron is this survivalist, but indeed, like, she's sort of fighting off instinct. She doesn't seem vicious or dangerous. She's just simply doing what she has been taught to do. It's like muscle memory for her. For him, it's like there's this slow burn behind his eyes that's like, dude, just fucking try me. Like, I got nothing to lose. I promise you. Like, there was something about that I really enjoyed. Like, I almost put him as my best performance because of that, because he stood out in that way. But it was a smaller portion of the movie. But I really like that character because it's like, yep, like, indeed, these are the kind of people you hire to do this. They're not fantastical, debonair, like, spies. They're not James Bond types. They're hardened people that come from hard backgrounds, and you read it all over his performance.
He's the truest sense of a mercenary. He's there to get paid, and there's no morality or emotion involved. It's a paycheck. That's what this
Yeah.
is. It's a paycheck, and he's going to kill anyone who gets in his way. And it becomes more personal when his brother gets killed and he says, "That's my brother over there." And so it becomes more personal, but he's there for a job. He's a mercenary. That's all it's about. It's all about the money for him. That's all he's there for. Also, the other one, by the way, was Tiger Mask.
Oh, Tiger Mask.
It was actually played by Simon Barrett, the writer, who was actually the guy behind that mask. So you had Ty West in this movie. Simon Barrett plays a small role. So everyone has a little appearance in there somewhere, some way, shape, or form. But yes, yeah, he was Tiger Mask was the other one. So for me, listen, I admit I'm going for the lowest hanging fruit here, but I do want to give credit where credit's due. Aaron is my favorite character as the total badass protagonist in this film, the heroine. I've said it numerous times throughout this podcast, talking about the switch that Simon Barrett and Adam Wingard made with this movie, the conscious decision to make her a badass fighter and not the surviving final girl. And I love that. I love that they twist that on its head. Like I said, it reminded me a lot, in obviously a lesser extent to this, or to a better extent than this, but like Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, because while she's a victim throughout the earliest part of that movie, she eventually becomes a fighter. Like, she fights back. Like, she sets traps to catch and kill Freddy Krueger. And that's kind of like this one. Like, she's not hiding in the closet. She's not cowering in a corner. She's not hiding behind anybody else saying, "Save me." She's like taking charge, setting up traps, and fuck these people. I'm taking them down. And that's terrible because, like I said, she's the alpha. She is the alpha in that room. Like, the alphas in that room are the killers and Aaron. They're on equal footing because they'll do whatever it takes to win and survive. And I really like that character. I really, really enjoyed the performance. Obviously, Sharni Vincent is great in that role. But I just love that. Like I said, I love Final Girls. I love the slasher trope of that. I get it, and I do enjoy it. But it was nice to see her being the hero the entire time. She was the reason these people are going to survive, even though, ultimately find out like half of them are in on a trick to kill them all. But she's there to protect the group, and she is the alpha. And I love that they made the woman the alpha.
Yeah, I more than anything, I just love how, like, immediately proactive she was. It did create that sense of mystery for me. It's like, why is she so proactive? Like, that there's clearly a reason for that. But the fact that it's just from the jump proactive and actively hunting down the hunters was new. It was new and refreshing for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I just enjoyed that role, and like I said, I enjoyed that character, and I appreciate that they wrote her that way. That, like, she came across as a total badass. She wasn't. Like I said, she wasn't the damsel in distress. That was very much Felix was the damsel in distress. So
Yeah, Felix is Crispin, definitely the damsel in distress.
He was definitely the one tied to the railroad tracks, waiting for somebody to save him. Let's talk about best scare, Patrick, because this is a horror movie, and we always like to have a good scare. So, what is the best scare in your next?
Pretty early on during the attack, there's a lot of chaos, and they're trying to find their way to get away from the windows, because at first they're just being attacked by crossbows. I think that the plan was to just crossbow the fuck out of these people, and they're creeping by a window, and a black gloved hand like busts through the window, They do it a few more times after that, but that initial one was a great jump scare. It just like kind of got me in a movie that that is sort of about like a seek and destroy or sneak attacks. It's really a sneak attack movie. So that initial like hand coming through to try and grab her was really great.
That was probably the most jarring jump scare of the movie.
Yeah.
Because really, even though there's a home invasion happening, you really didn't see that one coming. Like it was just boom out of nowhere. It grabs her through the window, and then that's again you realize rather quickly you're not just going to grab Erin because she grabs a knife and literally stabs it through the dude's hand and traps
Yeah.
the wall. I'm like, damn. But that scene is that is definitely one of the best jump scares of the entire movie, and probably the best jump scare. Because again, even though the home invasion is starting, I totally did not see that coming the first time I watched this movie.
Yeah, you don't expect that.
So mine is similar in that vein, and mine comes at the end of the movie, which is after Crispin is groveling and trying to basically buy off his girlfriend, which sounds horrible, which is horrible, by the way. She just finally is just like, all right, I'm ready to shut this guy up. And she stabs him in the neck, and she stabs him, and he's like, why? And she's like, why not? And she stabs through the IB and is done with it. And then pop, she gets shot by the cop outside. Really jarring in that moment because you do see earlier in the film, she's able to send out a 911 message, which she mentions early in the film. She's like, well, you can sometimes send a message, and if they get it, they'll respond. So let's just try until the signal works again. And at one point when she's hiding behind the closet, behind the drapes, she's able to send out a signal, and you see it. I honestly the first time I saw this movie, I kind of forgot that it worked because all this other mayhem starts happening, the chaos keeps happening, the revelations happen, Crispin's the killer, all these Crispin's in charge, Crispin's the guy responsible, all this kind of stuff. And then when she kills him, you're like, yes, like this little weasel finally got what's his, and then boom, pop, there's the cop who shoots her in the shoulder. And you're like, oh shit. So that was a good scare for me just because, again, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, the timing on it was great because it was almost just immediately after Crispin gets it, she gets popped like super quick, and you're like, oh shit, where'd that come from? Oh yeah, there's a cop here.
Can I ask real quick? We haven't talked about this, but do we like the ending with the her setting the trap with the axe and the cop walking in? I liked it. Here, I will say I liked it for this reason. I loved that she set the trap with the axe. And as you always say, and I'm turning this back on you, Patrick, when you show us something, make sure to actually deliver with it. You can't show us she's setting a booby trap with an axe with bricks tied to it so it swings down real hard on whoever's dumb enough to open this door. You can't show us that and not have it actually come into action. And the funny thing is, all these, like even Crispin walks through the window and you're like, oh shit, here's the moment he could have gotten the axe. You can't do that because he needs to go through his groveling, weenie things he's doing. It's funny, though, and rather befitting that at the end, it's the cop who's like coming through the door. She's like, no. And then the axe comes down and then your neck splatters across. I enjoyed it because, A, the axe trick paid off because you have to pay it off when you set it up like that. And B, it was just a nice twist that it was the cop who gets it in the end and not like one of the family members.
Yeah, it's the Chekhov's gun. It says you show it, you got to use it, right? So they were showing it. They made a very clear and deliberate. Uh, uh, they set it up. They show her setting it up, and then you go, okay, so how's that going to play out? And I think why I didn't like it is that in the end it will implicate her. Like when the rest of the cavalry arrives, they go, oh cool, you killed everybody in the house and the cop. Okay, so like it fucks her over, which I didn't like. I didn't like that. Like I didn't want the end of this to be she's totally fucked over, because she is by that stretch. I would have preferred it if somehow like maybe there was just a conversation between her and Crispin outside the window where he does all the groveling and all that shit. It wouldn't have been visually, it wouldn't have been as dynamic for them to be doing that. So I get why he's in the house basically kneeling and licking her paws, begging her to help him. It would have been nice if that would happen to Crispin, but it doesn't. So it's okay. It's just, and it was part of that humor that I just didn't love about the movie. But you got to pay it off. So, that's how they chose to pay it off.
Let me throw this out there. Not to say this is going to change your opinion totally, but isn't it kind of fitting that the girl who comes from nothing, who actually saves herself and defeats the whining, privileged children trying to get off their parents, isn't it almost befitting that she would end up being the one to take the fall for it? Like, it's kind of like, you kind of like in a real world situation, you're kind of like, yeah, that's probably what would happen. Like, she's the one who would get screwed in this whole thing. Like, somehow it would turn back around on her because they're like, oh, you grew up in a survivalist compound. You're,
Right.
you were kind of trying to get into this family of privilege and blah, blah, blah. Like, she's like the lower rung of society, and you feel like that it's pretty befitting that she would end up taking the fall for these shithill people who were out to kill their parents for an inheritance. Like, it almost feels befitting to, like, she has to take the fall for this because that's life. Like, that's just life.
That part is true, yes, but unfortunately, the reason why I do bump up against that particular piece of logic is because the cop dies by her design, not by anything that any of the fucking shitheels did. Like, they didn't set up that axe, she did. So it's like, it's literally like she fucking sealed her own fate, which kind of sucks. Like, it's just the one thing where it's like, well, why did you do that? Like, like why did you seal her fate by her own design? If you sealed her fate by the fact that, like, oh, like maybe her and Crispin survived that last moment, and then he can go, she did it all. She's been tracking me down. She seduced me when I was a professor and blah blah blah. Like, he could have done it that way. It's not as sexy, not as good a way to do it in a movie terms, but in this way, it was literally her design that killed the cop and seals her fate. So that's why I bump up against that idea
Yeah, and again, it's like I said, it's almost befitting. Like I said, it just feels like
a little bit. Yeah.
it's sad because then you feel like, oh yeah, that's probably what would happen to her. So, yeah. All right, let's move on to best gore because there is a lot of gore in this movie, a lot of blood in this movie. Patrick, what was your favorite gore? I have a feeling I know where you're going with this one.
Oh man, I fucking loved this one. So at one point, I believe Aaron just decides she's facing down one of the mercenaries, and she's like, "Fuck it," and she jumps out a window. It's just a great little action piece, a little stunt. She jumps out the window, and then she looks down at her leg, and she's like, "Oh fuck, there's like a piece of glass on my leg because I just jumped through a giant window." That makes sense. And she kind of hobbles away and into the woods, and she's like, "All right, time to take this glass out of my leg." And you expect I don't know, about a 3-inch piece, Damon. What was that, like 8.5, 9, 10 inches of glass coming out of her leg?
Giant shard of glass just covered in blood and very slowly moving as they whip
Yeah.
from her leg. It's very, very hard to watch.
And in a movie with plenty of gore, the fact that I never actually saw any gore, it was just watching a very long piece of glass come out of this girl's pant leg, and you're just like, yeah, it's fucking disgusting.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. So for me, there's a lot I could have gone from. And
yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot of good gore. But the one I ended up going with, just because it's so fucked up in the moment when it happens, is when I just forgot her name all of a sudden. Let's see if I can get it again here. Kelly, Kelly is Drake's wife, right? Like, I'm getting that right.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. When Kelly runs out of the house and she escapes and she gets to the neighbor's house and she breaks in and she realizes the guy's dead, but the killers come and attack her and they chuck her through the window. She sees that Larry Fassinden's dead, and they basically just beat the shit out of her, like throw her around the house. And then at the very end, she's laying on the ground, and they basically do a golf club swipe with an axe to kill her. It's just so gruesome when he does it. He does like the golf swing, and then thwack, and then you look down and you see the axe in her face, and just her face is all bloodied and messed up. I thought that was a really cool effect and some good gore and a creative use of an axe that you don't normally see. Normally you see it attacking with an axe, like a hatchet axe like that. But the fact that he used it like a golf club and just swung down on her head, I was like, damn, that was pretty vicious.
That was almost my best kill. It was very close.
I like that one a lot, though. That was good gore. And because they zoom in on it, I kind of forgotten they zoom in on it because I remember the scene, but then I was like, oh yeah, they do zoom in and show her gored up face. So I was like, all right, that's my favorite gore. What about, and to that point, what is the best kill? Because there are a lot of kills in this movie.
Yeah, there are, Damon, a lot of fucking kills in this movie. The body count is high for a contained horror film. There's 14 kills. I counted it. One of them, I think two of them, Larry Fassenden and the girl that he's with, I believe they like most of it happens kind of off screen, but they're kills indeed. And you see aftermath and all that stuff. So that all counts. 14 kills in a movie this small is impressive. And it just feels like there's constantly kills. And I decided to go with what I would say is maybe the marquee kill of the whole film. I really do think it is, which is when she's finally fighting off Felix and Z, who have decided to just desperately try to fight back, and they fail miserably. They're in the kitchen. Aaron grabs a blender, like the blender top, or the blender motor position, slams it onto the top of Felix's head, plugs it in, turns it on, and blends his head to pulp. Damon, this kill is ridiculous. It is. When I say ridiculous, I mean like absolutely no. Like it doesn't work, but it does because it's creative. And I ultimately went with it because I just go, they know damn well there's no logic that makes it. Only in Terrifier universe does that kill make sense. It's so out of tone. It's so out. It was trying to. I think it was trying to kind of blend in with, no pun intended, blend in with their comedic tone, because it's just so out of the ordinary. It's not something that can actually happen. But I was like, you know what? I appreciate you guys for actually following through with that.
Well, it works also because she smashes the blender over Felix's head, so the glass breaks from the like actual container, and then she's like, oh, I still have another part of the blender I can use. Slam down on his head, plugs it in. It's just a really cool effect when you see him you plug it in, the blender kicks on and Felix's head gets turned to mush. It's a really, really good effect, and it's really cool. And listen, you say like this would never happen. I remember watching interviews from when I was when we did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I was watching interviews with people who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I want to say it was Bill Moseley and some other people were talking. They're like, you know, you have to suspend disbelief because in reality, a chainsaw is an awful weapon. Like it doesn't actually work the way you think it would work. And like when you would go after somebody, like these chains break, they stall. When they run into weird things, they don't work anymore. And he's like, it wouldn't actually work nearly as well. But it's a cool motorized, like, you know, when you think about like you know, Leatherface holding the chainsaw, really cool weapon. In reality, it would never actually work that well. Like a chainsaw would never actually work as like an actually like viable weapon for a mass murderer. It would stall out, it would fuck up, it would never work.
Right.
But the visuals of it are awesome, so that's why you do it. Same thing with the blender. Would a blender, I hope if you put the Vegemix on somebody's head and turn it on, would it actually blend their head? You'd hope not, but it's a cool effect.
Totally cool effect. Yeah, you just got to give it to him for going, all right, I hadn't seen that before. Good on you.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. So I had a couple here that I wanted to go with because a couple of the ones that I really liked, like weirdly, I really liked the dad's death when he just like the killer just comes up and just slashes his throat, blood goes flying, and Felix just goes, "Really?" Really? Like the most privileged, like weenie thing you can say is dad just got his throat slashed in front of him and the guy's mad because you got blood on him. And he's like, really? Right here? You had to do it right here? I was just like, Jesus Christ, man, this kid.
Yeah.
But I ended up going with what almost ended up being my favorite scare as well, which is when the sister gets her throat slashed with the wire across the door. Really cool effect. Listen, when I first watched this movie back in like, let's just say 2012, I know I watched it within like a year of it coming out. When I first watched this movie and they're gearing up, so like they're all trapped in the house and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're trying to figure out how they're going to escape. And it's Amy. Is that the right one? The daughter?
I believe so.
I'm the fastest one here. I'm going to go for help. Now, when I first watched this movie, my initial instinct was, okay, we're going to open the doors, they're not expecting it, and you're going to run out before they can do anything. My initial thought watching this movie was they're going to open the door, she's going to go running, and she's going to get plugged with a crossbow right between the eyes and just go flying backwards. I was like, here it comes, it's coming. I appreciated the simplicity and the ingenuity to set up the wire across the front so when she runs out, she literally basically almost decapitates herself. She slices her own throat and dies right there. I love that scene. That's a really cool and creative kill, and it's just different because I knew it was something was going to happen. I knew she was going to get plied, but I thought for sure she's going to get blasted with a crossbow arrow. Instead, she just basically runs into a wire and slits her own throat.
It's also a great build up to that kill because everybody's debating who should go out there. You know, like they're kind of fighting over it, and then you realize like the reason that Felix and Crispin are kind of fighting over it is to play the idea that maybe she shouldn't go out, and then they ultimately decide, oh yeah, it should be you because they need to get rid of her. So you know, it's another bit of slime ballery, if you will. And but yeah, that build up to that is like you're anticipating what's going to happen when this door opens. I wasn't ready for razor wire either. And then it pays off perfectly because you're like, what's she going to run into? Oh, I didn't see that coming. I almost wish her head had come like almost halfway off or something because I'm a psycho like that. But
I was expecting like she's going to open the door and she's going to run out and get smacked with like a machete, or she's going to hit with the bolt from the crossbow. The razor wire was a good twist. I was like, oh shit. And then like it just slices her throat. And also it's funny. You mentioned like the blender is so like not realistic. I agree with you. Like the throat slash was cool, and I like that because like in reality, you wouldn't behead yourself running across a wire like that, but you could gash your throat open.
Oh
like,
yeah,
like that was realistic.
Yes,
but we're doing the blender trick. Why not just do the decapitation thing? Like have her just literally lop her own head off. Be like, oh shit, that would have been cool. But again, I still like the ingenuity of the razor wire, which again I didn't see coming in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Patrick, let's move on to an interesting category here because I gotta be honest. This is one of the toughest categories you've ever presented to me.
I knew it.
History of this show. Tell us the category, and then I'm stuck. I am so stuck on what I want to give as an answer here.
Yeah, so I realized like this is very much a trapped in a house horror. We talk about contained horror all this time. Damon talks about his love for contained horror all the time on this podcast. Indeed, this is a contained horror. It takes place in a rather large house, but they're pretty studious with how much of the house they use. And so I asked the question, what is the best trapped in a house horror film? And I also had trouble because, to be honest, Damon, a lot of films are low budget. This was made for only $1 million. I say only. Well, guess what? That's not a lot to make a movie. I'm actually helping produce a movie right now with a budget that hovers around there, and we are indeed looking for a single home to work in. That's a lot of horror movies. It's a lot of them. So indeed, what is the best trapped in a house horror, Damon? Do you have an answer for me?
I do, and I'm a little angry because I have to go with this.
You have to choose, yeah.
I have to choose, and I don't like that because when I was going over it, when you sent over the categories last night, we're recording today. I sat there for no less than a half hour racking my brain, like, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and I was like, okay, and then I started really needling it down to trapped in a house because I was like, well, trapped in a mall, well, of course that's Dawn of the Dead, trapped in certain store, whatever it is. So there's a lot of different trapped in situations, and as you mentioned, I absolutely adore contained horror. But listen, going back years of this podcast, the film that really turned me into a horror fan when I was 5 years old. It had no business watching a horror movie, but it still scared me to death when I saw it. How can I not go with the original classic, Night of the Living Dead? Are there other movies that have gone beyond that I absolutely adore and I would put right on par with it? 100%. There's a lot of I could even mention Them and the Strangers. I really like both those films.
Yeah.
I really enjoy those. But I got to go with the OG. I got to go with Night of the Living Dead. That is, I'm not saying it's the original Trapped in a House, but it is one of the original Trapped in a House horror films. And it's iconic. I mean, it is a zombie film. It is George Romero's original movie, and it holds up to this day. It's a classic, and how could I not go with Night of the Living Dead?
It's a great pull. It really is because there is a like larger world implied, but they get funneled into this house, and most of the horror happens there, and it's done rather efficiently. It is sort of the model for like how you would do it. So I love that pick. That's a fantastic pick. I went with a more modern movie, truth be told, and that's The Boy Behind the Door. And we've talked about this movie, Damon. You can go back and listen to our review of it. We absolutely adore this movie. Uh, 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 Directors David Charbonnier and Justin Powell managed somehow to put two children and an unseen bad guy in a film for 90 minutes and make it terrifying. Like truly terrifying. One of those movies, Damon, I said, where when I was done, like my chest felt tight and I had to decompress. I had to watch like funny, happy stuff afterwards. This wasn't like, there weren't ghosts. It was just two kids and they were in danger from a person. And to be able to use a house, camera angles, and three characters and make it terrifying, I'm so very impressed by the minimalism and the effectiveness all together, all at once. And by the way, they did another movie, the same directors, called The Djinn, takes place in a 2-bedroom apartment. I almost chose that because I was like, that's an even harder ask to make a good scary movie in a 2-bedroom apartment, but they managed that too. So I did go with The Boy Behind the Door because of the house element of it and how it is truly a very terrifying, very effective movie.
It's funny you say that. So I saw your answer, Boy Behind the Door. So I knew that's what you were picking. And I almost went with The Djinn, but because that is also our pals, David Charbonnier and Justin Powell, who we've had on the show. You can go back and listen to that episode. I almost did it, but then I was like, well, technically it takes place in an apartment, not a home. So I went,
Right.
I decided not to go with that. But that is the genius of that. The Boy Behind the Door is sometimes humans are scarier than monsters because the humans are monsters, and that's what happens in The Boy Behind the Door. The human is the monster, and that is sometimes even more terrifying because once again, just like these home invasion films, when we talk about the strangers, like that could happen. Boy Behind the Door could and probably does happen, not without
Yeah.
spoiling what that movie's about, but it 100% could, and that makes it even scarier. The Djinn is a more supernatural take on that, but I to this day I marvel how you do that effective of a horror film in a 2-bedroom apartment. I still don't know how they do it. Like it's a trick, master of art that I have never understood, and I don't know if I ever will, because that is such a small amount of space to work with, and yet they somehow turned it into this really truly terrifying film. It's brilliant. But yeah, there's a lot. Like I love self-contained horror. I love these kind of films. So there's a billion of them out there. Like I said, I feel bad leaving some of these off the list of movies that are just great movies like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you could go much. I don't think you could go wrong with Night of the Living Dead or Boy Behind the Door.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking and those are two of the best. Truth be told, I mean, they're amongst a lot of great horror movies that are self-contained.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Patrick, let's talk about our next category, which is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. It's pretty self explanatory, but just in case you're new here, this is the category where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we basically say, should they remake it? Should they give it a sequel? Or should they just leave it alone? So, Patrick, when it comes to your next, remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
Damon, there is no sequel to Your Next, is there? There's no Your Next 2 or is
No, they talked about it briefly, but it never happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to say leave it alone on this one. I think because I do think what's more unique about it than anything else is how many elements they balanced well. Because you could say, "Oh, let's do another remake. Why not? Let's do a sequel that's set in a different time. Like just make a Your Next with a completely different group of people and play with it." I I don't know. Like they did it. Like what could I possibly need more of? I know The Strangers is having a trilogy come out,
Yeah.
which is going to be really weird, and I guess it's going to talk about the origins of The Strangers, if I'm not mistaken. Directed by Rennie Harlan, which you go, I have to watch it, but also that kind of defeats the purpose. The scariness of The Strangers was I never knew why they did it, and it's terrifying. And so to me, I mean, this movie reveals all of its elements or whatever. I don't need a sequel that's the aftermath of like Aaron, who is now in jail for what they assume is the murder of all these people and all that stuff. I don't really want any of that. That's not why I think I latched on this movie to begin with. So as I kind of pane through all of the different options, to me it's just easy enough to say leave it alone.
I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm actually going to say a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's why. First off, yes, you could just do another Your Next in a similar ish situation. You couldn't do the children of privilege setting up their parents to be killed because that's already been done. But you could set up some other version of this film, Home Invasion, with the same elements, the same bits and pieces, and call it Your Next too. But my idea as a writer, Patrick, listen, I came up with a perfect title for the Thanksgiving sequel when I said I know what you did last Thanksgiving, which is my spin on I know what you did last summer. I think that's a perfect sequel for perfect title for Eli Roth sequel. I know what you did last Thanksgiving. I think that's perfect. Pat myself on the back for that one. I think I have the perfect title for this one, and it works out like this. You call it You're Still Next. And what you do is Aaron goes to jail because they think she's the killer. They think everything, and then she gets bailed out by a wealthy unknown person. Comes and bails her out of jail and stands up for her and hires a lawyer to help her and everything. And she's like doesn't know why all this is happening. You come to find out that the wealthy person is a relative of the family from the first film. So immediately you're set up to think, okay, this guy is a weasel too. He's just like his brother or his sister, whoever it was that he's related to in this family. And then you just do it as a straight up revenge thriller, not him getting back at her because that's what you're thinking it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's the family or the friends of the killers. Because we learned that the one killer's brother is there with him, and he's very distraught when he finds out his brother gets his head bashed in by a meat tenderizer. These are military guys. If you've ever been military, if you've ever been around military guys, it's a very close-knit unit, and these units are not typically 3 guys. You're talking about 10, 12, 15 people. Their brothers in arms could be like, hold on now, you killed them, we're going to fuck you up. And so you think it's the family. She's getting drawn back into this because they're offering to help her. But then these soldiers of fortune come back for revenge, and it kind of all unravels again in a different location. You don't do it in a house.
Yeah.
Maybe you do it in some other way. It's a road trip thing. Could be like that, whatever it is. But I think there's a way in, and it is interesting. And there's my idea for it. And so I think the title is You're Still Next.
You're Still Next. Well, Damon, I can't argue with that. If you ask me if I would sit down to watch it, the answer is yes.
It's just interesting. Like I said, you could do it. I know they did talk about doing a sequel. They just never did. Adam Wingard went on to make massive, Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't hate it if they somehow find a way back into this. You're on a certain time clock, of course, because the actors are all going to age and things like that. But I don't know. It'd be fun. It would have been fun if they would have actually gone back and done this like 2 years later. I think it would have been a lot of fun to see a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, hey, why not? I mean, this is the horror business. We're looking for sequels all the time, anyway.
Yeah. All right, Patrick, next category. Let's talk about can we survive this horror film? And this is always a fun category where you and I inject ourselves into whatever horror film we're watching and we ask the question, could we survive this horror film? So when it comes to your next, Patrick, are you walking out that door? Or are you making it out alive?
I suppose I have to assume that I'm, oh gosh, what's her name? The daughter. I have to assume I'm like Amy's date, In fact, apropos, right? I have done documentary filmmaking. I am perhaps the Tariq of the group, so it would make sense that I would be, the boyfriend. My background, Damon. I'm a trained fighter as well, a trained jujitsu fighter, I should specify. But you and I talked about this earlier. We come from hard backgrounds with not a lot going for us when we started out. Everything was fight. You were fighting for scraps. That's what we did. So Aaron would have had backup that night, and it would have been little old Patrick for sure, because he is little and old, but damn it, he's got a lot of fight in him. Yeah, I think I survived this horror movie just because I'm not what that family was, which was they were completely sheltered They were completely weak. They had no idea how to face adversity. And I have a little. I have a listen. My life is great now. I'm not complaining at all. Like, but about my current life is fantastic. But I know how to fight for what I need, and I'd certainly be fighting for my ass in that situation.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I'm in a very similar vein as that. Now, could I get picked off by a crossbow before I have a chance to react and just get killed? Sure, that's a possibility.
Sure.
But outside of the randomness of that, I would also feel pretty comfortable about surviving this horror film because while the while the killers are highly trained military men, so that in and of itself could get you killed just because you're not fit to deal with those level of soldier. Okay, that I can
Yeah.
understand. If I got killed in that regard, totally understandable. And so I would say it's okay that I don't survive this. But just in terms of the willingness to fight back, much like you said, I will fight for survival. I would not be the guy cowering in the corner crying and saying, "Somebody save me." I would be the one helping Aaron put the nails into the boards and setting up like the Home Alone traps for these guys coming in the house. I'd have a paint can tied on a knot on a string up on the stairs. I'd have the whole thing set up. Yeah, so I would be that guy. I would be confident that I would be that guy. Now, again, could I not survive just because one of them kills me? Sure, but in terms of me fighting back and not just cowering and running, yeah, I wouldn't be Crispin. Even if Crispin was actually brave, I wouldn't be the guy being like, "Let me run for help." Dude, I don't run very far anyways, so you're probably not gonna get me to run. I'm the guy who's gonna be like, "Come on, come
Yeah.
on, in the house, buddy. Yeah, let's go." And so yeah, I would be like, all right, let's do it. Let's just rumble. Like you're either gonna kill me or I'm gonna kill you. One of us is going down, and one of us ain't making it out of here alive.
Yeah, at minimum, I'm going out with a fight for sure. Like that's how that goes. I feel way more confident than I think anybody in that house felt, and I sure as shit wouldn't be like, yeah, let's go out the front door. That'll work. Like I don't know, that was just a whole idiotic discussion. But of course, it paid off. Airtight script, so it made sense. But I would have been the Tariq going, we're not going out the fucking front door. That's stupid.
But I will say, and to my credit, I've seen enough zombie movies, and this goes back to my love of Night of the Living Dead and other movies like this. I've seen so many zombie movies and TV shows that I feel like it's almost like in Zombieland when Woody Harrelson's character picks up a banjo and uses it as a weapon. I am so attuned now after seeing so many zombie films that I look around a room and I'm like, that could be a weapon.
Yeah.
That could be a weapon. You could turn that into a weapon. So, like in that weird regard, like just like when Aaron opens the drawer and finds all the knives and the meat tenderizer and all the things, she's like, "Here, everyone, grab a weapon." That's not always an instinct. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, a meat tenderizer would be a really effective weapon." It actually is, and so I do that sometimes where I walk in a room and I'm just like, you know what? You could break that and do that. There's a broom you could snap off the broom handle and stab. It's like I'm like always in zombie survival mode, so I think I'd be okay.
I don't want to tell you what's under my bed at a hand's reach. I don't know if I legally can tell you.
Yeah, no, I did. I'm what that's what I were talking about when we did the movie when we did the review of The Descent. I was like, I don't care how safe it's supposed to be. I would still have like a knife on my hip or something, just
Yeah.
because it's my nature. Yeah, I keep a couple of weapons in my car. I keep a couple of weapons at home, always within arm's reach. So yeah, I am that guy where I'm like kind of prepared for that.
I'm laughing because we do have a great international audience, and if you're out there in places like Denmark and Ireland and the Philippines, we love you and we see you. Thank you for listening to us. But they're probably like typical fucking Americans, like armed to the fucking teeth, and it's kind of true. It's I don't
Yeah.
want to say it's not, but we definitely come from that. We come from the stock that is more willing to kind of have a little something ready, or even just make something like like a standard household blender a weapon in case we need it.
Exactly. You got to be ready at all times. What do they say in the Boy Scouts? Is it be prepared?
Something like that, some shit like that. I
Yeah.
was never a Boy Scout.
I was never either, but like, yeah, that's me. Be prepared. Ever since, I'm like, you know what? Zombies could be coming. I'm going to keep some weapons hidden around the house. I'm ready to go. So, in that regard, I think I'd be okay. I'd be like, that could be a weapon. That could be a weapon. The blender. I'd be like, let's. Yeah, let's do it. Patrick, our last category is always, is it scary? At the end of the day, when we watch Your Next, is this movie scary?
It's it's I think it's a really engaging movie, and it has the elements that you're looking for in a scary movie. This movie doesn't scare me. It doesn't, and I think even like the what to me was the unsuccessful humor kind of like almost derails any sense of like dread. I don't even find this a particularly dreadful movie, but it's a compelling movie. I don't want to. This isn't a discount of this movie, but it does have a couple of great jump scares that got me, and it has tons of kills and tons of gore. So in that respect, you go, oh, okay, this definitely qualifies for the horror category. Like, there's no question about it. But on no level, literally on no level, do I find this movie scary or dreadful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's scary in the sense of the situation, right? Like the home invasion angle, because that is, again, even though this is different in the sense of this was an orchestrated plot by the kids to kill their parents and their family members so they could inherit money. There is still at the beginning the randomness of it all, that this could happen to anybody, and this is just a home invasion. And when the killers are wearing these creepy animal masks, it makes it even creepier. So in that regard, I would say it's scary. I think some of that gets drawn out a little bit when you do discover that it's a plot to kill their parents and kill everyone else so they can inherit money, which again is a good twist, but it also kind of takes away a little bit of that fright of just like they're just here to kill everybody. That being said, I would say yes, it is scary in that regard. It's a home invasion thriller, and I know those can be very terrifying to some people. I like them too. This one's I wouldn't put on par with like The Strangers or Them as far as
No.
movies that really freaked me out. But again, if you're into like that home invasion angle and it is scary, there are elements that can scare you in this movie, absolutely. And as you mentioned, the blood and the gore, there are some people who scary to them means the gore, and there's some great gore in this movie. So yeah, I'll say scary. It's if we're doing it on like the hot one scale, it's not like the final
Oh
hot
yeah.
one drinking, but it's the first couple wings on hot one where your hot ones. You're like, it's got some spice to it. That's
A
kind of
little kick.
little kick to it. Then by the crying and pouring milk on yourself and like just bathing yourself in milk.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's not Martyrs and it's not The Descent. But it's got some elements there. It's a little spicy at moments.
Yeah, a little spicy. I think it's one of those ones where it's like it starts scarier and then it gets way less and less and less scary because I think it almost becomes an action movie at some point. And once like honestly for me, when Z was introduced, the girlfriend, I was like, "Oh, she's in on whatever's going on." Like
Yeah.
whatever's gonna happen, she's part of it. Like it was such a like humongous red flag that it just diffused any dread or mystery for me from that point on. So yeah, I mean, listen, it's a great movie and you should watch it. If you haven't seen Your Next, like I hadn't truly absorbed it at the point of watching for this podcast, I'm saying you should definitely watch it. It should be on your list of horror movies to watch.
100%. And I do appreciate that we continue to make the most random references on this show. I just pulled out hot ones for some unknown reason to compare that to scare factor in a horror film. I'm still daily impressed by your ability to compare fans to Insane Clown Posse once upon a time.
Or furries.
And furries. And I also got a note recently that someone really enjoyed my conversation when we reviewed It's a Wonderful Knife, and I somehow brought up Sam Kinison and Married with Children as a reference in that podcast. So we have an innate ability to pull the most random shit out of our asses when we're talking about stuff on this podcast.
Our asses are like the gift that keeps on giving, Damon. There's just constantly things being pulled out of there.
I have no idea why I pulled hot ones today. It just came into my mind. I was like, there's a scale, and like as the hot ones is the scale, like the ultimate, the devastating hot pepper whatever, and then you got the lower end of the scale. I guess that's the best way I could compare it.
Yeah, Martyrs, Speak No Evil, The Descent are right at the top with fucking just dunk me in a vat of milk because that's just it. They're just absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, those are the ones that make you cry and want to leave and never hot wing again.
Yeah,
So,
this just burns. This just hurts.
Yeah, this just hurts. This isn't fun. Yeah, that's those movies. All right, that is our show for this week. Your Next is available right now on Max, I believe. It is obviously also out there to rent. By the end of this, I would hope you've either seen this or you're just can't wait to see this because it is a really fun, enjoyable horror film. I know you said it's dangerous to inject the word fun into horror. But I say fun because it's a little goofy at moments and the characters are a little Weasley, but that's what makes it fun because they get theirs in the end. And it's a lot of enjoyable fun like that. The performances are great, the action's great, kills are great, gore is great. So, highly recommend Your Next. Go check it out if you haven't. If you ever have movies you'd like us to review, maybe you've got a Your Next kind of gem in the rough out there and you want us to review it, don't ever hesitate to send us a message, send us an email. You can reach us at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com, or you can always find us on our social media channels. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on X/Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us messages on there. We'd love hearing from you guys. So please reach out to us at any time you ever want to speak to us. And then don't forget to check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, over on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now, so do not hesitate to find us on YouTube. We love finding new subscribers over there. That's growing each and every week, so we appreciate that as well. And you can always find us on our own personal social media channels as well. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in each and every week to Rewind of the Living Dead. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
You're next.